Have you ever looked at the flickering lights on a Christmas tree or felt the chill of a December night and wondered if the traditions we cherish today are actually much older and more mysterious than we've been told? What if I told you that beneath the modern wrapping paper and the cozy songs lies a history filled with ancient sun gods, wild winter spirits, and a time when celebrating Christmas could actually get you arrested? Today, we are taking an epic journey through the hidden corridors of time to uncover the startling evolution of the world's most famous holiday, from the frozen forests of the North to the forbidden celebrations of the early colonies. Before we dive into this incredible story, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay with us as we explore the strange and fascinating history of our world. The story of Christmas does not begin in a stable or a shopping mall, but in the profound silence of the winter solstice, the shortest day and longest night of the year. Thousands of years ago, ancient civilizations watched the sky with a mixture of awe and terror as the sun grew weaker and the shadows stretched longer across the earth. To these early people, the sun was the source of all life, and its apparent decline in December felt like a slow death of the world itself. In the heart of northern Europe, the Germanic and Scandinavian tribes observed this time as Yule, a period of 12 days where the veil between the world of the living and the world of the spirits was believed to be at its thinnest. To fight back the darkness, they brought massive evergreen trees into their dwellings, not as decorations, but as living symbols of survival, because these were the only plants that refused to die when the frost claimed everything else. They would haul a colossal log, known as the Yule log, into the center of their great halls and set it ablaze, believing that the heat and light of the fire would give strength to the sun to begin its journey back toward the spring. As the log burned, they feasted on preserved meats and drank fermented ales, creating a pocket of warmth and life in a landscape of ice. While the North was burning fires to the sun, the Roman Empire was celebrating the wild and chaotic festival of Saturnalia. Dedicated to Saturn, the god of agriculture and time, this week-long event was a total reversal of the social order, where the normal rules of Roman life were tossed aside. For a few days in December, businesses and courts were closed, and the rigid hierarchy of master and slave was temporarily abolished, with masters often serving their servants at the dinner table. It was a time of intense public feasting, gambling, and the exchange of small gifts like wax candles and clay figurines. The Romans also celebrated the birth of Mithras, the unconquered sun, on December 25th, marking the moment the days began to lengthen again. When Christianity began to rise within the borders of Rome, the early church leaders faced a significant dilemma because the people were deeply attached to these winter celebrations and refused to give them up. Since the actual date of Jesus' birth was not recorded in the Gospels, Pope Julius I made a strategic decision in the 4th century to designate December 25th as the official day of the Nativity. This wasn't done to change the timing of history, but to bridge the gap between the old pagan world and the new Christian faith, allowing the light of the world to coincide with the rebirth of the sun. As the Middle Ages took hold of Europe, Christmas became a bizarre mixture of solemn religious piety and rowdy, often violent street parties. It was a season of misrule, where a commoner would be crowned as a mock king and lead a parade of revelers through the streets, demanding food and drink from the wealthy, in a tradition that was more like a riot than a modern holiday. If the rich refused to provide a feast, the mobs might vandalize their property or block their doors, creating a tension that lasted for centuries. This version of Christmas was so chaotic and seemingly un-Christian that by the 1600s, the Puritans in England and America declared war on the holiday itself.
In 1659, the Massachusetts Bay Colony officially banned Christmas, making it a criminal offense to skip work or celebrate on December 25th. They viewed the holiday as a pagan vanity that encouraged sin and gluttony, and for nearly 20 years, the sounds of carols were replaced by silence in the streets of New England. It took nearly 200 years for the holiday to be rehabilitated and transformed into the family-centered celebration we know today. This shift was largely driven by 19th-century writers like Washington Irving and Charles Dickens, who moved the focus of the holiday away from the drunken streets and into the warmth of the private home. Dickens's A Christmas Carol redefined the season as a time of charity, forgiveness, and the domestic hearth, while the royal family, led by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, popularized the German tradition of the Christmas tree, forever changing the visual landscape of the holiday. Today, when we look at a modern American Christmas, we are seeing a tapestry woven from all these different threads of history. We see the Roman gift-giving, the dramatic evergreens, the Victorian family values, and the ancient human desire to find light in the darkness. We have turned a terrifying seasonal transition into a global phenomenon of peace and goodwill, yet the echoes of the past remain in every candle we light and every song we sing. The story of Christmas is ultimately a story of human resilience, showing us that no matter how dark the night or how cold the winter, we will always find a way to gather together, share what we have, and wait for the sun to rise once more. As the 19th century drew to a close, the holiday underwent its final and perhaps most dramatic transformation, turning from a domestic Victorian ritual into a global economic and cultural powerhouse. This era saw the birth of the modern Santa Claus, a character who would become the face of the season for billions of people. While the figure of Saint Nicholas was rooted in the history of a 4th-century Greek bishop famous for his secret acts of kindness, the American version of Santa was a unique blend of Dutch folklore, British poetry, and commercial artistry. In 1823, the publication of the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, now commonly known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, gave us the iconic imagery of the 8 tiny reindeer, the sleigh on the rooftop, and the jolly, soot-stained traveler with a belly like a bowl of jelly. This poem moved the holiday away from its rowdy, adult-focused past and firmly established it as a time of magic and mystery for children. By the 1930s, the red-suited, white-bearded version of Santa was solidified in the public consciousness through iconic advertising campaigns that portrayed him not as a distant saint or a frightening spirit, but as a warm, grandfatherly figure who brought a sense of wonder to every household. This shift toward childhood innocence coincided with a massive change in the way we eat and gather during the winter months. The medieval tradition of the boar's head was largely forgotten, replaced by the roast turkey and the honey-glazed ham, foods that were once luxuries but became symbols of the American dream of abundance. The holiday table became a theater of nostalgia, where recipes passed down through generations, from the spiced pumpkin pies of New England to the buttery biscuits of the South, served as a link to our ancestors. But Christmas history isn't just about what happened in the dining room, it is also about the evolution of the landscape itself. The invention of electric lights by Thomas Edison's associates in the late 1800s transformed the holiday from a candle-lit, fire hazard-prone event into a dazzling display of technology. Suddenly, the darkness of the winter solace was not just fought with a single Yule log, but with thousands of glowing bulbs that turned city streets and suburban homes into glittering wonderlands. This technological leap allowed the spirit of the holiday to move outside, creating a shared public experience of light and beauty that reflected the growing optimism of the modern age. However, as the holiday became more commercial and brightly lit, some of the older, stranger traditions began to fade into the background, though they never truly disappeared. In many parts of Europe, the winter season remained a time for ghost stories and tales of the supernatural, a tradition that Dickens tapped into, but that predates him by centuries.
People believed that during the 12 days of Christmas, the boundary between the physical world and the spirit realm was so thin that animals could talk at midnight, and the wild hunt of spirits could be seen flying across the moonlit sky. Even the simple act of caroling has its roots in this mystical past. Originally, caroling was part of a tradition called mummering, where people would wear elaborate disguises and masks, going from house to house to perform short plays and songs in exchange for food and drink. These mummers were often unrecognizable, representing the chaotic spirits of winter, and their presence was a reminder that the holiday was a time when the ordinary world was suspended and anything was possible. As we moved into the 20th century, Christmas also became a time of profound geopolitical significance, most famously during the Christmas Truce of 1914. In the middle of the horrors of the First World War, soldiers from both the British and German sides laid down their arms on Christmas Eve, emerging from their trenches to sing carols, exchange small gifts of tobacco and food, and even play games of soccer in the muddy wasteland of no man's land. This spontaneous outbreak of peace remains one of the most powerful stories in human history, proving that even in the face of total war, the shared traditions of the winter season could bridge the gap between enemies and remind them of their common humanity. It showed that Christmas had become more than just a religious or commercial event. It had become a universal symbol of the hope for peace on earth and goodwill toward all people. In the modern era, the celebration has expanded far beyond the borders of the Western world, adapting to different climates and cultures in fascinating ways. In some parts of the world, Christmas is a time for fireworks and beach parties, while in others, it remains a quiet time of reflection and candlelight. We have seen the rise of the Christmas movie as a modern folklore, with stories of Grinches, elves, and family reunions becoming as central to our experience as the ancient myths of old. We spend months preparing for a single day, driven by a deep-seated instinct to make the end of the year special, to close the chapter of the past 12 months with a sense of joy and generosity. Whether we realize it or not, when we decorate our homes or exchange gifts, we are participating in a global ritual that has been shaped by the hands of millions of people over thousands of years. We are connected to the Roman citizen, the Viking warrior, the Victorian poet, and the modern shopper, all of us unified by the same simple desire to turn the coldest time of the year into the warmest time of the year. The history of Christmas is a story of survival, of taking the ancient fear of the dark and turning it into a celebration of light, ensuring that no matter how much the world changes, the magic of the season will always find a way to endure. As we dive deeper into the tapestry of midwinter, we find that even the smallest decorations on our trees and the most specific treats in our stockings carry the weight of centuries of folklore and unexpected history. Take, for instance, the candy cane, which has become a ubiquitous symbol of the American holiday season. While many believe its shape is purely religious, representing a shepherd's crook, historical records suggest a more practical origin in 17th century Germany. Legend has it that a choirmaster at the Cologne Cathedral handed out sugar sticks to keep children quiet during the long Christmas Eve services, and to justify the treats in the church, he had the ends bent to resemble the staffs of the shepherds who visited the manger. Over time, these plain white sticks evolved, gaining their iconic red stripes and peppermint flavor in the early 20th century, becoming a sugary bridge between the discipline of the cathedral and the joy of the home. Similarly, the shimmering tinsel we drape over branches today began as a luxury item made of real hammered silver in Germany. Because silver tarnished quickly in the heat of candlelit trees, it was eventually replaced by less precious metals, but the original intent was to mimic the sparkling frost of the winter forest indoors, bringing the cold beauty of the outside world into the safety of the hearth.
This desire to find beauty in the winter landscape also gave birth to one of the most beloved theatrical traditions in history, the Nutcracker.
Originally a dark fairy tale by E.T.A. Hoffmann, it was transformed into a ballet in late 19th century Russia, blending the grace of classical dance with the fantastical imagination of a child's dream on Christmas Eve. In the United States, the Nutcracker became a seasonal rite of passage during the 1960s, serving as a gateway for millions of families to experience the high arts. The story of a wooden soldier coming to life to battle a mouse king echoes the ancient themes we've explored, the struggle between order and chaos, and the belief that on this one magical night, the boundary between the inanimate and the living dissolves. This sense of enchantment extends to the folklore of the Three Kings, or the Magi, who represent the global reach of the holiday's message. In many Spanish-speaking cultures and parts of Europe, the celebration doesn't end on December 25th, but continues until Epiphany on January 6th. This day, known as Three Kings Day, commemorates the arrival of the wise men in Bethlehem, and in many traditions, it is the kings, not Santa Claus, who bring gifts to children, arriving on camels rather than reindeer. This reminds us that the 12 days of Christmas is not just a song, but a literal period of festivity that historically allowed communities to feast until their winter stores began to run low. The way we light our homes during these 12 days has also seen a fascinating evolution from the spiritual to the scientific. Before the advent of the light bulb, people would tie small wax candles directly to the branches of their trees using melted wax or pins. This was a breathtaking sight, but it was also incredibly dangerous, requiring families to keep buckets of water or sand nearby at all times. The transition to electric lights didn't just make the holiday safer, it democratized the celebration. In the early days of electricity, a string of holiday lights was a luxury that only the wealthiest families could afford, often costing the equivalent of several $100s in today's currency. As manufacturing improved, these lights became a symbol of the American middle class, leading to the competitive and colorful displays we see in neighborhoods today. This festival of light is a direct descendant of the Roman candles used during Saturnalia and the Jewish tradition of the menorah, proving that across different faiths and eras, the act of burning a light against the winter gloom is one of the most universal human impulses. Even the cards we send to friends and family have a story rooted in the pressures of modern life. The first Christmas card was commissioned in London in 1843 by Sir Henry Cole, a man who was too busy to write individual letters to all his associates. He hired an artist to design a scene of a family toasting the holiday, with the words, "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you," printed underneath. While some critics at the time were scandalized by the image of children drinking wine in the illustration, the convenience of the card caught on instantly. It allowed people to maintain social connections in an increasingly fast-paced world, a tradition that expanded with the invention of the postage stamp and eventually led to the billions of cards exchanged globally today. This practice, like so many others, reflects the Victorian obsession with inventing traditions that felt ancient even when they were brand new, creating a sense of stability during a time of rapid industrial change. As we move toward the final chapters of our journey, we see that the history of Christmas is not a straight line, but a circle that keeps returning to the same themes: the importance of family, the necessity of generosity, and the celebration of life's persistence. Whether it's through the mythology of a gift-giver flying through the night sky, or the simple act of sharing a meal with loved ones, we are all participating in a story that is much larger than ourselves. We are the keepers of a flame that has been passed down through countless generations, and every time we hang an ornament or tell a story, we are ensuring that the darkness of winter will never truly win.
The magic of Christmas isn't just in the gifts or the decorations, it's in the way it forces us to stop, look at the people around us, and remember that even in the coldest season, we have the power to create our own warmth. As we continue our journey through the frost-covered pages of history, we find that the very air of the season is filled with melodies that have traveled across centuries to reach our ears. The history of Christmas music is a fascinating mirror of the holiday itself, shifting from the sacred to the secular and back again. In the early days of the medieval church, music was solemn and performed exclusively in Latin by choirs of monks. But the common people wanted something they could sing in their own tongues. This led to the rise of the carol, a word that originally referred to a circle dance accompanied by singing. These early carols were often performed in village squares and were filled with rhythmic energy, celebrating the joy of the season with a raw, earthy spirit that the formal church sometimes found suspicious. It wasn't until the 19th century that many of the hymns we consider traditional today were composed or rediscovered. Songs like Silent Night were born in small snowbound villages, in this case an Austrian town, where a broken church organ forced a priest and a schoolteacher to write a simple melody for the guitar. This humble beginning created what is now the most translated song in human history, proving that the most powerful parts of the holiday are often the ones created out of necessity and a simple desire for peace. This period also saw the rise of seasonal treats that are as much about art as they are about flavor, such as the whimsical world of the gingerbread man. While ginger was a rare and expensive spice brought to Europe from the Middle East during the Crusades, it was Queen Elizabeth I who is credited with the idea of molding the dough into the shapes of people. She reportedly had gingerbread figures made to look like the foreign dignitaries and suitors who visited her court, turning a spicy snack into a playful diplomatic tool. In Germany, the tradition took a more architectural turn with the creation of gingerbread houses, inspired by the dark and magical Brothers Grimm fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel. These edible structures, adorned with candies and frosting to mimic the snow and sweets of the forest, became a staple of the German Christmas markets, which are themselves one of the oldest traditions in Europe. These markets, or Christkindlmarkts, have been held in town squares since the late medieval ages, serving as a vital gathering place where the community could buy handmade toys, warm spiced wine, and the supplies needed to survive the winter, creating a sensory experience of sights and smells that still defines the holiday for many today. The landscape of the holiday also required a home for its most famous resident, leading to the fascinating evolution of the North Pole myth. In the earliest legends, St. Nicholas lived in what is now modern-day Turkey, but as his image merged with the Norse god Odin and the British Father Christmas, his home began to move further north into the mysterious, unexplored regions of the Arctic. It was the American cartoonist Thomas Nast in the mid-19th century who first officially placed Santa's workshop at the North Pole. At the time, the North Pole was a place of great mystery and heroic exploration, representing the very edge of the known world. By giving Santa a home there, Nast provided him with a sense of isolation and magic, a place where the laws of nature didn't apply, and where an army of elves could work in secret year-round. This mythology was further expanded by the advent of the Santa letter, a tradition that began in the United States as a way for parents to encourage good behavior in their children, eventually leading to a global postal phenomenon where millions of letters are sent to the Arctic every year, keeping the mystery of the North alive in the digital age.
The way we celebrate the days leading up to the holiday has also been shaped by the concept of the Advent calendar, a tradition that began in the 19th century as a simple way for German families to count down the days in December.
Originally, they might make a chalk mark on a door or light a small candle for each day, but this eventually evolved into the intricate paper calendars with small doors that hide a picture, a poem, or a piece of chocolate. This daily ritual of anticipation highlights a key aspect of the Christmas season, the idea that the journey toward the day is just as important as the day itself. It creates a sense of slow time in an increasingly fast world, forcing us to savor the build-up and find joy in the waiting. This same spirit is seen in the tradition of the Christmas stocking, which is rooted in a legend about St. Nicholas throwing bags of gold through a window to help a poor man's daughters. The gold reportedly landed in their stockings, which were hanging by the fire to dry. Today, we replace the gold with small trinkets and oranges, the orange itself being a historical nod to those bags of gold, continuing a cycle of secret generosity that has lasted for over 1,000 years. As we look at these stories, from the smallest candy to the vastness of the North Pole, we see that the history of Christmas is a collection of human fingerprints. Every generation has added its own layer, its own flavor, and its own hope to the holiday. We have taken ancient fears and turned them into games, ancient spices and turned them into art, and ancient stories and turned them into a global language of kindness. When we step back and view the holiday as a whole, we see that it is perhaps our greatest collective creation, a time when we agree to believe in the impossible and to act with a little more grace toward our neighbors. It is a testament to our ability to find meaning in the darkness and to ensure that no matter how much time passes, the heart of the winter will always be filled with light. As we move beyond the familiar snowy landscapes of the North, the story of Christmas takes on a vibrant and global hue, proving that the spirit of the season can thrive even under the heat of a tropical sun. One of the most beautiful examples of this cultural blending is the history of the poinsettia, the brilliant red plant that has become the unofficial flower of the holiday. Native to the hillsides of Mexico, where it was known by the Aztecs as a symbol of purity, the plant was introduced to the United States in the early 19th century by Joel Roberts Poinsett, the first American minister to Mexico. However, its association with the holiday is rooted in a much older Mexican legend about a young girl named Pepita, who was too poor to buy a gift for the baby Jesus at the local chapel. On Christmas Eve, her cousin reminded her that even the humblest gift, if given with love, is sufficient in the eyes of the divine. Pepita gathered a bundle of common weeds from the roadside and placed them at the altar, and suddenly the weeds burst into magnificent crimson blooms. This story reflects a recurring theme in the history of the season, that the most profound magic often arises from the most humble circumstances, and that beauty can be found even in the wildest corners of the earth. While plants and stories were traveling across borders, the Industrial Revolution was quietly beginning to change the very nature of the holiday by revolutionizing the way toys were made and given. Before the mid-19th century, most toys were handmade from wood, rags, or clay, and they were rare treasures passed down through families. But as factories began to rise, the mass production of tin soldiers, porcelain dolls, and intricate clockwork trains transformed the holiday into a season of spectacular consumerism. This change turned the local general store into a magical destination and gave birth to the tradition of the department store window display, where elaborate mechanical scenes would draw crowds of thousands to marvel at the possibilities of the modern age. This shift also changed the relationship between parents and children, as the Santa's workshop narrative provided a way for the miracles of the industrial factory to be seen through the eyes of wonder rather than the cold reality of machines. The toy became a symbol of a parent's love and a reward for a child's good behavior, solidifying the idea that the holiday was a time for the impossible to become tangible. In other parts of the world, this same period saw the development of unique traditions that reflect the specific history of their regions. In the Philippines, the world's longest Christmas season begins as early as September, centered around the Parol, a star-shaped lantern that represents the Star of Bethlehem. These lanterns, originally made from bamboo and paper, have evolved into massive glowing masterpieces that light up the night, serving as a beacon of hope for a nation that has endured centuries of colonial shifts. Meanwhile, in Iceland, the folklore of the season remains tied to the Yule lads, 13 mischievous trolls who descend from the mountains one by one during the nights leading up to Christmas. Rather than a single Santa, children in Iceland have to navigate the pranks of characters like Door Slammer and Sausage Swiper, a reminder of the raw, untamed nature of the Icelandic winter. And then there is the Yule Cat, a giant, terrifying female said to roam the countryside and eat anyone who hasn't received new clothes for Christmas. While this might sound harsh to modern ears, it was historically a way to encourage productivity in the wool industry during the dark months, showing how every holiday tradition once served a very practical purpose for the survival of the community. As we look at these diverse celebrations, we realize that Christmas has become a universal language that every culture translates into its own dialect. Whether it is the lighting of the Hanukkah menorah, which celebrates a different miracle of light during the same season, or the Kwanzaa celebrations that honor African heritage and community values, the end of the year has become a global time for reflection and renewal. The industrial toys may have replaced the hand-carved blocks, and the electric lanterns may have replaced the wax candles, but the underlying pulse of the season remains unchanged. It is a time when we collectively agree to look at the world as it should be, rather than how it is. We celebrate the birth of hope, the beauty of the natural world, and the unbreakable bonds of the human family. Every time we hang a star in a window or share a piece of gingerbread, we are participating in a massive, ancient conversation that spans the entire globe. We are connected to the Mexican girl and her crimson weeds, the German toy maker at his workbench, and the Roman citizen at his banquet. The history of Christmas is not a static thing kept in a museum. It is a living, breathing entity that changes with us, reflecting our fears, our technology, and our deepest dreams. As we stand at the edge of another year, these stories remind us that we are never truly alone in the dark. We are part of a long line of dreamers who have looked at the winter sky and decided to fill it with stars, ensuring that the spirit of the season will continue to light our way for 1,000 years to come. The journey of the Christmas tree to the shores of America is a story of resistance, cultural blending, and eventual triumph that mirrors the immigrant experience itself. In the early days of the United States, the Christmas tree was often viewed with suspicion by the dominant English-descended population, who still held on to the old Puritan beliefs that such displays were pagan mockery. It was the waves of German immigrants in the mid-19th century who brought the tradition with them, setting up small trees in their homes in Pennsylvania and New York to remind them of the forests of their homeland. These early American trees were often small enough to sit on a table and were decorated with homemade ornaments like strings of popcorn, dried berries, and hand-carved wooden stars. The turning point for the American Christmas tree came in the 1840s, when the image of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's tree was reprinted in American magazines, but with a clever twist. The editors edited out the royal crowns and transformed them into a generic American family. Suddenly, what was once seen as a strange foreign custom became the height of fashion, and the Christmas tree began its march from the parlor of the elite to the living room of every household, eventually culminating in the massive national tradition of the Rockefeller Center tree, which first stood as a simple symbol of hope during the height of the Great Depression. This era of the 1930s was perhaps the most challenging time for the holiday in modern history. Yet it was during this period of economic hardship that the white Christmas dream was truly born. As families struggled to put food on the table, the holiday shifted away from the extravagant toys of the industrial boom and returned to its roots of emotional connection and shared resilience. It was during these lean years that songwriters began to craft the melodies that define our nostalgic view of the season today. The concept of a white Christmas wasn't just about the weather, it was a yearning for a simpler, purer time, a world before the stock market crash and the looming shadows of a Second World War. When Irving Berlin wrote the song White Christmas in the early 1940s, it struck a chord with a generation of soldiers stationed far from home, turning the holiday into a symbol of the home they were fighting to protect. This cinematic and musical version of Christmas, filled with snow-covered villages and warm, glowing windows, became the gold standard for the American holiday, creating a shared cultural memory that persists even in regions where it never snows.
As we look at the logistics of how the holiday functions today, we see the echoes of the massive social shifts that occurred during the mid-20th century. The rise of the automobile and the expansion of the highway system changed Christmas from a local community event into a time of great migration, where millions of people travel across continents to be with their families for a single day. This movement of people created new traditions, such as the Christmas road trip and the specific music and snacks associated with long winter drives. It also gave rise to the modern Christmas movie genre, which often focuses on the difficulty and humor of getting home for the holidays, reinforcing the idea that the physical act of returning to one's roots is a sacred part of the season. At the same time, the mid-century saw the introduction of materials like aluminum and plastic, leading to the silver Christmas aesthetic of the 1950s and 60s, where artificial trees and neon-colored ornaments reflected a world obsessed with the future and the wonders of the space age. Beneath all this changing technology, the folklore of the season continued to adapt, finding new ways to explain the magic of the night to a more scientific world. The myth of the North Pole became more elaborate, with the addition of characters like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Originally created as a promotional character for a department store coloring book during the Depression, Rudolph's story of being a misfit who eventually saves the day resonated deeply with a public that felt vulnerable and overlooked. Rudolph became a modern myth, joining the ranks of the ancient Greek gods and the Norse spirits, proving that we are still capable of creating new legends that speak to our current values. This ability to absorb new stories into the ancient framework is what keeps the holiday alive. It is not a stagnant relic of the past, but a growing, breathing entity that reflects the heart of whatever era it finds itself in. As we stand in the modern day, we see that the history of Christmas is a testament to the power of human connection. We have taken the ancient primal fear of the long winter night and transformed it into a global festival of light and generosity. We have blended the rituals of Roman banquets, the songs of Austrian villages, the plants of Mexican hillsides, and the dreams of American songwriters into a single cohesive experience. Whether we are celebrating in the heart of a bustling city or in the quiet of a rural farmhouse, we are all part of this continuous thread of history. We are the inheritors of a legacy that celebrates the birth of hope in the most unlikely of places. And as we look forward to the future, we can be certain that as long as there is darkness to be fought and love to be shared, the spirit of the season will continue to shine. Every light we string and every gift we give is a defiant act of joy, a reminder that the winter is only a season, but our capacity for kindness is eternal. The tradition of the department store Santa is perhaps one of the most fascinating intersections of commerce and folklore in human history, marking the moment when a mythical spirit became a flesh and blood person you could actually talk to.
In the late 19th century, as the Industrial Revolution transformed cities into massive hubs of trade, retailers realized that they needed a way to draw families into their grand new palaces of consumption. In 1890, a businessman named James Edgar in Brockton, Massachusetts, decided to dress up in a custom-made Santa suit and walk through the aisles of his dry goods store. He didn't do it to sell a specific item, but to create an atmosphere of wonder. And within days, children from miles away were lining up just to catch a glimpse of the man from the North Pole. This marked the birth of the Mall Santa, a role that required thousands of ordinary men to step into the boots of a saint, creating a direct physical link between the ancient legend and the modern child. This practice turned the department store into a sacred space of childhood, where the act of sharing a wish became a central rite of passage for millions of American families. While children were whispering their secrets to Santas in busy cities, the theatrical world was busy cementing the holiday's emotional core through the endless adaptations of Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. While we have already touched on its literary impact, its life on the stage and screen is what truly made it a universal myth. From the very first year of its publication, the story was adapted for the stage, often in rowdy, unauthorized versions that brought the struggles of Bob Cratchit and the redemption of Ebenezer Scrooge to the working class who couldn't afford the book. The character of Scrooge became the ultimate archetype of the holiday, the man who has everything but understands nothing, until he is forced to look at the ghosts of his own past. This narrative of a second chance resonated deeply with a world undergoing rapid and often cold social changes. It reinforced the idea that Christmas was a time for self-reflection and that it was never too late to open one's heart to the community. This theatrical tradition eventually paved the way for the Christmas special on television, where animated characters and variety show hosts would bring the same themes of redemption and family into the living rooms of the mid-20th century, turning the television set into a modern version of the communal hearth. The very structure of the holiday season is often defined by the 12 days of Christmas, a phrase that many know from the famous song, but few understand in its historical context. Historically, the 12 days began on the evening of December 25th and ended on the Feast of Epiphany on January 6th. This was a period of liminal time, a gap between the old year and the new, where the normal rules of work were suspended. In rural England and France, this was a time for mummering and guising, where people would swap clothes, wear animal masks, and perform strange symbolic plays that represented the death of the old year and the rebirth of the new. The song itself, with its lists of leaping lords and swimming swans, was likely a memory game played by children during these 12 nights. If you forgot a lyric, you had to pay a forfeit, usually a kiss or a piece of candy. Beneath the whimsical lyrics lies a hidden history of the resources required to survive a medieval winter. The birds mentioned were all common sources of food for a feast, and the gold rings represented the wealth needed to see a household through to the spring. As we look at the specific treats that define our modern winter, none carry quite as much mystery as the gingerbread man and his elaborate houses. The use of ginger in holiday baking is a direct link to the medieval spice trade, when aromatic spices like cinnamon, cloves, and ginger were seen as precious gifts from the Orient, mirroring the gifts of the Magi. In the 16th century, the guilds of gingerbread makers in Germany and France were the only ones allowed to bake the treat, except during Christmas and Easter, when the restrictions were lifted for the public. This made gingerbread a rare and highly anticipated luxury. The tradition of the gingerbread house was popularized by the Brothers Grimm's tale of Hansel and Gretel, but it tapped into a much older human desire to build a dream home out of sweets, a vision of abundance in a season of scarcity. These edible structures, adorned with white icing to mimic the heavy snows of the Black Forest, became a staple of the European Christmas markets, which remain the beating heart of the holiday in the Old World. As the 21st century began, the holiday faced its newest transformation, the digital age. The way we share the season has moved from physical cards to instant messages and video calls, allowing families separated by thousands of miles to sit at the same dinner table. Yet, even in this high-tech world, we find ourselves clinging to the most ancient symbols. We use digital fireplaces to mimic the Yule log, and we track Santa's progress across the globe using satellite technology. This fusion of the ancient and the modern proves that the history of Christmas is not about the tools we use, but about the spirit we carry. It is a story of a human family that refuses to let the fire go out, a family that finds a way to make the darkness beautiful. Every time we participate in these rituals, we are adding our own voices to a chorus that has been singing for millennia. We are part of a continuous journey that reminds us that no matter how much the world changes, the need for light, for love, and for a shared sense of wonder will always remain the same.
As we move into the final chapters of this expansive journey through time, we encounter one of the most whimsical and loud traditions of the season, the Christmas cracker. This beloved staple of the British and Commonwealth holiday table was the invention of a London sweetmaker named Tom Smith in the mid-19th century. Originally, Smith sold simple sugared almonds wrapped in twisted tissue paper, but he noticed that sales were sluggish. Legend has it that one night, while sitting by his fireplace, he was startled by the loud crack and pop of a log settling in the embers. This sudden burst of energy gave him a brilliant idea. What if the act of opening a sweet could be just as exciting as the treat itself? He developed a chemical strip that would create a small, harmless bang when pulled from both ends. To make the experience even more festive, he eventually replaced the candy with a small gift, a paper crown, and a joke or a riddle. The paper crown is particularly significant as it serves as a modern echo of the ancient Roman Saturnalia, where participants would wear festive headgear to signify that for a brief moment everyone was royalty and the social order was suspended. This simple cardboard tube has become a bridge between Victorian ingenuity and the ancient human desire for a little bit of noise and laughter to drive away the winter silence. As the world entered the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the way we express generosity underwent a quiet revolution with the birth of the gift card. While some may see it as a cold or impersonal modern invention, it actually solves a problem that has plagued the holiday since the time of the Romans, the social pressure of the perfect gift. In ancient Rome, people would often exchange strenae, branches from sacred groves, as symbols of good luck, which eventually evolved into the complex and sometimes burdensome system of gift-giving we see today. The gift card emerged in the 1990s as a way to return agency to the receiver, allowing the spirit of the holiday to be about the freedom of choice rather than just the exchange of physical objects. This shift reflects a broader change in our culture toward experiential giving, where the value of the holiday is found in the memories created and the time shared, rather than the clutter of the material world. It is a modern solution to a 1,000-year-old tradition, proving yet again that Christmas is a living thing that adapts to the needs of the society it inhabits. Throughout this long exploration, we have seen how the holiday has survived the rise and fall of empires, the banning by religious zealots, and the pressures of global industrialization. We have seen how a humble plant from Mexico, a spice from the Silk Road, and a poem from an anonymous New Yorker could all merge into a single cohesive experience that feels as if it has always existed. But perhaps the most enduring part of the history of Christmas is the White Christmas phenomenon, the idealized, snowy version of the holiday that has been exported to every corner of the globe. Even in places like Australia or Brazil, where December falls in the height of summer, the imagery of snowmen and sleds persists. This is because the white Christmas is more than just weather. It is a mental landscape. It represents a world that is clean, quiet, and transformed by a blanket of white, where the scars of the previous year are hidden and the world feels new and untouched. It is the ultimate expression of the rebirth that the ancient tribes celebrated during the winter solstice, a reminder that no matter how worn down we feel by life, there is always the possibility of a fresh start. As we reach the conclusion of this 10,000-word odyssey, we find ourselves back where we started, in the quiet, dark nights of December, gathered around whatever light we can find. The history of Christmas is ultimately the history of us. It is the story of the human family trying to make sense of the seasons and trying to find a reason to be kind to one another. From the first Yule log to the latest digital greeting, the message has never changed. We celebrate because the light is coming back. We celebrate because we have survived another year. We celebrate because for a few short weeks we choose to believe that the world can be a place of peace, magic, and wonder. We are the latest links in a chain of celebration that stretches back to the dawn of time, and by telling these stories, we keep the fire burning for the generations to come. As you drift off to sleep or go about your day, remember that you are part of this grand, ancient tapestry. The magic of the season isn't something that happens to us, it's something we create together, one light, one story, and one act of kindness at a time. In this final stretch of our long journey, we find ourselves standing at the precipice of the modern world, looking back at the vast horizon of human history. When we look at the holiday today, we are not just seeing a single day on a calendar, but the cumulative memory of every civilization that has ever tried to find warmth in the winter chill. The evolution of the holiday in the digital age has taken these ancient impulses and projected them into a global, interconnected reality. We have moved from the local village hearth to the global village, where a person in a skyscraper in Tokyo can share the same festive atmosphere as someone in a cabin in the snowy woods of Maine. This connectivity has given rise to new traditions like the Secret Santa, an anonymous exchange of kindness that mirrors the ancient secret acts of St. Nicholas. It is a game of chance and generosity that reminds us that the best part of the season is often the joy of giving without the need for recognition. It is a social ritual that strips away the ego and focuses on the simple delight of a surprise, keeping the spirit of the 4th century bishop alive in the era of high-speed internet. As we examine the final pieces of the Christmas puzzle, we must also recognize the profound role that memory and nostalgia play in the history of the season. Christmas is perhaps the only time of year when we collectively agree to live in the past, the present, and the future all at once. We look to the past by repeating the recipes of our grandparents and singing songs that were written before our great-grandparents were born. We live in the present by gathering with those we love, and we look to the future by making wishes and setting goals for the coming year. This triple-layered experience is what makes the season feel so heavy with emotion. It is a time when the passage of time is made visible. Every ornament we hang on a tree is a marker of a year gone by, a physical record of where we were and who we were with. In this way, the Christmas tree becomes a living family tree, a chronicle of our personal histories woven into the larger tapestry of human existence. It is a defiant stand against the fleeting nature of life, an anchor that keeps us grounded even as the world around us changes at a dizzying pace. This sense of permanence is also reflected in the enduring popularity of holiday classics in film and television. In the mid-20th century, the advent of broadcasting created a new kind of communal experience. Families no longer had to go to the village square to hear a story. The story came to them.
Films like It's a Wonderful Life became essential parts of the holiday canon, not because they were about Christmas rituals, but because they dealt with the core human themes of worth, community, and the impact of a single life. These stories replaced the oral folklore of the ancient fireside, but they served the same purpose, to remind us that we are part of something larger than ourselves. They reinforce the idea that the spirit of Christmas isn't a magical force that descends from the sky, but a choice we make to see the value in our neighbors and the beauty in our own ordinary lives. This is the ultimate legacy of the holiday's long evolution, the realization that we are the creators of the magic we seek.
As the final embers of our story begin to glow softly, we can see the full shape of this 10,000-word journey. We started in the pitch-black void of the prehistoric winter solstice, where the first humans huddled together and prayed for the sun to return. We traveled through the wild, upside-down celebrations of Rome's Saturnalia and the candle-lit halls of medieval kings. We saw the holiday banned by those who feared its power and reborn in the tender stories of the Victorian age. We watched as it crossed oceans, adapted to new technologies, and became a global symbol of hope during the darkest days of war and economic struggle. Through it all, the holiday has remained a constant beacon. It has been a mirror reflecting our changing values, our technological progress, and our deepest spiritual longings. It is a story of survival, of taking the cold and the dark and transforming them into a season of light and warmth. So, as the night grows deeper and the world settles into a quiet rest, let the weight of these thousands of years of history give you a sense of peace. You are not just a spectator in the story of Christmas, you are a participant in a grand ancient ritual that has been perfected over millennia. Whether you are lighting a candle, wrapping a gift, or simply sitting in the quiet reflection of the season, you are doing exactly what your ancestors did in their own way. You are declaring that the light is worth celebrating, that community is worth building, and that hope is the most resilient force in the universe. The journey of Christmas doesn't end on December 25th. It lives on in every act of kindness and every moment of shared wonder throughout the year. As we close this chapter, we carry with us the wisdom of the ages, that the longest night is always followed by a new dawn, and that as long as we have each other and our stories, we will never truly be in the dark. Thank you for staying with us on this incredible journey through the real history of Christmas. And as you move forward into your own traditions, may your heart be as light as the first spark of the sun on a winter morning.